All right, I'm going to weigh in on the discussion between Tattoo Skin 72 and Fistful of Dicks over the concept of gender as a social construct. This was laughable to me, and I'm not entirely sure. I didn't read all of the comments on I guess the several videos now. I have not read all of the comments. I read a good sampling of the comments. There's simply way too many for me to catch up on. But if I am understanding Fistful of Dick's position correctly, and I think it's what they are saying is complicated, and I completely disagree if I am understanding correctly, because of the fact that biologically, scientifically, sex, gender have a real, very, very specific meaning. And it's not a social construct. It has nothing to do. The social construct of whether we call it male or female, yes, we've assigned this word female to this reproductive structures, and we've assigned male to that reproductive structure. And if they were reversed, they would just be reversed. The words would be. But the point is that the actual real thing is actually a real thing. And I know that the title was a joke. Okay, I mean, I understand that Michael's title, boys have a penis, girls have a vagina, was a joke. And it actually is quite funny. And that actually works really, really well for mammals. It doesn't work very well for the rest of the animal kingdom or plant kingdoms. It works for mammals, because the actual definition biologically for male and female is male reproductive types produce sperm, female reproductive types produce ova or eggs. That's the real definition. For example, most birds, look at birds, are great, with a few exceptions. I think ducks, geese, ducks, that anatoforms, but most birds have completely identical external genital structures. They have a cloaca that's exactly the same. There's no difference between them. Now they might have secondary sexual characteristics that differ. And internally, if you dissect them, you'll see that the testes and the ova, or the testes and the ovaries occupy roughly the same space. They look, those structures are the same. The main critical difference between them is that if you open them up, if you actually dissect them and do a histological examination of the gonads, you'll see that one's producing sperm and one's producing eggs. And this is really the rule within the animals, at least. You'll see that this really quite common throughout. There's very little actual difference. Now, males tend to have a different. There's a very common sexual dimorphism, where males have secondary sexual characteristics. They may be larger, or they might be a different color, or they might have horns or whatever that the females don't have. That's also very common. But the real difference, the real actual thing, when a biologist says this is a male, they're talking about whether it's vitellogenesis or spermatogenesis going on in the gonads. That's really what's critically important. Hopefully that made sense. So now since the discussion's on humans and not plants, fungi, animals. By the way, just for a little fun fact, when it comes to different sexes, some of the slime molds, these Myxomycota, whatever, they're actually, what is it? The one that's commonly studied, I forget the name now. That's kind of sad. Has 22 different sexes, which is kind of interesting. Not just male and female. 22 completely independent mating types that are chromosomally determined. Kind of interesting. That's obviously an exception. So anyway, now on to humans. So when we talk about a human being male or female, again, biologically we're talking about, do their gonads produce sperm? Do their gonads produce eggs? That's the real critical difference between the two. That's not social. That's not, and all of those things are also present and are also important. But simply biologically, Ignore what somebody, it doesn't matter what somebody says they feel like, or what role they play, or whether they fight in an army, or whether they bake bread. And I'm not using that as an insult in any capacity. I'm saying it as whatever a person's role is in society. The fact is, histologically examine their gonads. If there are ova present, it is a female. If there are sperm present, if there's spermatogenesis going on, it is a male. Okay, that's simple. Now to the rest of it. Now we get to where there is a social construct to a certain extent. There are biological roles males and females play. We have very much, even in our modern society, a lot of what people talk about sexism, and I am 100% behind equality of the sexes. But a lot of the things that are now becoming sexist, especially as society is modernized, are really biological roles, things that have evolved with our species. That doesn't make that right. It doesn't mean that we have a lot of things. We've got talk about. Oh, sorry, I'm going to get all confused here. For example, this is separate from sex or gender. But it's a biological. It's a fact that a male is something like 10 times more likely to kill, injure, or abuse a stepchild than they are their own biological offspring. That's a terrible thing. That's awful. It's horrible. It's wrong. It should be prosecuted. It's a terrible thing. But biologically, it's completely within the primate norm. Does that make sense? It's normal for primates. You see it throughout. It's a biologically sound principle. It's natural. Doesn't make it right. Okay. So when I talk about genders and roles and normal things, I'm talking about normal in the statistical sense of more towards the mean, not normal as in good or right or whatever. Abnormal can be good. And so what's normal for gender roles, what biologically evolved in our species, social behaviors, whether it be biological or mimetic, but those social structures evolved for a very specific purpose. The positive end of it being the descendants survived. Now we have such a complex technological society that those things are meaningless now. There's no longer a single male who cannot biologically give birth to an offspring, can raise an offspring paired with another male. A single female can raise a child on her own. Something that would have been very difficult just a few centuries ago. And certainly within evolutionary time, close to impossible. So these things have changed because of technology. Females are biologically tend to have less muscle mass than the male, and this is means again. This doesn't mean that there's not women that could kick most men's asses. It means that if you look at if you plot them on a chart, you'll see that while there's a considerable amount of overlap, the mean tends to be higher for men. But technologically, you're in combat with a rifle and whatever. It doesn't make any difference anymore. A woman can make absolutely just as deadly a soldier as any man could be, despite what biology confers. I hope this is making sense. I know this is kind of a rant. All right, now that I've gotten into what I hopefully explained, the normal, again, normal not being good or right, just normal as in towards the statistical mean of sexuality, I want to talk a little bit about where that varies a bit. Okay, I saw in a lot of the comments people brought up hermaphrodites, for example. People brought up transgender issues, even homosexual issues. All of those things are variations on this. Again, the vast majority of these things are natural. Again, natural doesn't mean good or right either. Natural just means that it has a biological origin, whether as a mutation, whether as a whatever the case may be, genetically determined, whatever the issue is. The point is that there's an organic basis for most of these things. So an individual can be, again, male, chromosomally 100% male, and yet be attracted to only other males. And there's a biological underlying reason for that. There's a biological basis for that. And even if there's not, even if it's a nurture issue in some case or whatever, that doesn't detract from this at all. The point is that it exists. It's real. There are people who genuinely are biologically one sex in all things, but mentally, socially feeling like the opposite sex, and that if I have not kept up on that research, but it turns out there's a whole lot of medical support for that. For the last several decades, it's now been realized that this is actually a real abnormality in development, where and I don't, again, abnormal, I'm not meaning that negatively. I mean where a chromosomally somebody is one sex, but there's a whole behind the scenes, behind the curtain, they really are biologically in many ways the opposite sex. And we now live in a time again where technology can fix that. Anyway, sorry, it's kind of again still rambling. Let's see where I'm going here. And then there's also chromosomal aberrations. Again, somebody brought up some of the XXY, for example, where somebody could have, basically they're getting extra input from multiple chromosomes that conflict with each other. That's a real thing that occurs. That's a real aberration. And then there's hermaphrodites that it's just simply and it's different than XXY, but where somebody is born with either external or internal genital genital morphology that matches both sexes. Typically, in at least the female function is non-functional. Typically, that doesn't mean it's 100%, but most often the female internal the ovaries aren't producing viable eggs, or in cases where the sperm. I don't know of a single hermaphroditic example of human where they could reproduce physically as a male or female, but more often than not, they'll have, for example, functioning testes, but an external vagina. They'll have the female structures, but then also sort of a cross between ovaries and testes, but they're producing sperm. These kinds of things, and again, that's a developmental aberration, and again, doesn't make them wrong. Anyway, I'm going to stop this now. I think I've rambled on way too long. Hopefully, I made some sense. I hope this is what you were looking for, Tattoo Skin, from me. So, all right, take care.